Sikkim 365 and Baylor Plus have teamed up to bring Baylor fans the ultimate content bundle. You can sign up now for $17.99 a month, a $5 monthly savings, and get instant access to all premium content on both websites. For more information, visit either sikkim365.com or baylorplus.com today. What's up, Baylor fans? Welcome into Inside Baylor Sports, the official daily podcast of Baylor Athletics. It's Monday, November 4th, and Grace and I are coming to you after another Baylor football victory, 3 in a row. And yeah, it's just another victory, but it is actually a really big victory if you're a Baylor fan because you haven't seen it much of late. Beating TCU for the first time since 2019, and that was only the third time since 2014. In the way that this game ended, so reminiscent of that 2014 game specifically. All the games that Baylor's beating TCU are usually close games. As of late, there's not any blowouts. So this one went kind of true to form for this rivalry for Baylor's sake. And man, initial reactions before we really get in this game about what Baylor was able to do against TCU on Saturday.
It's huge to go, 3-0 against Oklahoma State, Tech, and TCU all in a row. I mean, these are your biggest recruiting rivals. Like, these are the teams that you constantly week in, week out are recruiting against. I mean, for Baylor to get that done is massive. Like, we talked about those early season games, and I mentioned, losing those stinks, and the wins going forward don't necessarily make up for it, but winning these 3 games means a whole lot more than beating, in my opinion, than beating Colorado, Utah, and BYU. Like, these wins mean way more to your program and to what you're trying to build. It's a huge one. And for them to come out and win the way they did against TCU in a game where, they had to overcome those things that had cost them in the past, a few penalties that were just, crazy that we even have to talk about it because those penalties, a few of them were so bad. It almost cost Baylor this game. But in general, Baylor overcame those things and played really well, played really solid. TCU wasn't turning the ball over. TCU was doing everything they could to win this game, and Baylor still didn't let them win it. It was a huge one. I think it was a bit of a statement. They only won by 3, but the way they won this game, running the football, running TCU over, being the more physical football team, that's massive. And that stuff translates going forward, and it translates into the culture of your program.
Yeah, I went back and looked. Baylor has now rushed for 250 yards in 3 straight games. That has not happened since at least 2016. So there's a website I use, and they track back to 2016, and I didn't take the time to go back further than that. No other Baylor team has rushed for 250 yards in 3 straight games since at least 2016. And I'm guessing it's 2015 season just based on the way that they ran the football that year. So you're talking about basically a 10-year stretch where this has happened one other time. And it probably happened multiple times in that year in terms of 3 games in a row. But yeah, it was. I think you have to kind of start with the atmosphere that was generated for this game. I'm a big fan of great atmospheres, right? It's just so much fun. Like, you just can't, we've talked about, you can't replicate great atmospheres. And this wasn't a sellout. It wasn't a massive, there was a lot of momentum behind it, but it wasn't like this opportunity that felt like, oh, you just absolutely knew it was going to snowball. It's going to be a great atmosphere because of the game. But I thought the crowd was terrific in this game. Like, it was, especially in the second half, when it was like Baylor fans finally had that moment to be loud, get excited, boo the officials as bad as you thought they were. But it got loud in there in McLean a few times in that second half. And I was really impressed. And it kind of brought it all back to, like, man, this is fun. When this is rolling, it's a lot of fun. And to have that opportunity to make a statement as a fan base was really cool to see. And the blackout was awesome. The light, I wish they had LED lights for the stadium. But in general, it was just a really cool moment to see full circle, to honor the 13 and 14 championship teams, to end this one on a walk-off kick. Like, you couldn't have asked for a better atmosphere in this particular game, the way it played out.
Right. And I think that was something we mentioned going into this game. Like, you really needed to be like that. And Baylor made it like that. I mean, the fans showed up. They were loud. They were engaged the entire time. It was a night game, so there was no excuse about the weather. I know it was windy. It was a little cold, I guess, but it was like a great football atmosphere, great football weather. The fans did a great job. And I think the biggest thing, though, is the Baylor football team gave the fans a reason to cheer and a reason to stay engaged. This wasn't a game where you came out and you got down 21-0 and then looked around and were like, oh, we need the fans to be engaged. It's like, no, you got to come out and you got to play. Like, you got to come out and give them a reason to cheer. Baylor did that. The fans were engaged the whole time. It led to a terrific environment, one of the best environments I've seen in a while for a Baylor football game. I think that, the only season that comes close, maybe 2021 at times, there were a few good environments, but I think 2019 versus Oklahoma was the only one that was, way better, at McLean Stadium at least. And then obviously if you go way back to 2014 and whatnot, you can dive into a few of those there. But in general, this was one of those better atmospheres in McLean Stadium. Big reason for that was night game, 2-game winning streak. And of course, you're facing TCU.
Yeah, kind of a perfect storm situation to go 5-4, one step closer to bowl eligibility. And I got 3 games to get one if that's your goal. I think we said it last week. It's kind of, this is your chance to get kind of greedy, right? Like, just, you're not shooting for 1 at this juncture. Like, you're shooting for 3. And they're going to, when you look at these games, the West Virginia game, you don't know what the line's going to ultimately be. But you're going to have a shot to win that game in my mind. Then you come back to face Houston on the road, and then face Kansas at home to wrap it up the season. All going to be very, very important, but all very winnable games. So let's get into this one. And I want to start defensively, because there's been plenty made about this performance and what could have been if they would have played better in different spots and blah, blah, blah. But like, I've had multiple text conversations today, and we knew this defense was going to have holes, right? Like, there's never going to be a situation like this was never going to be a top 25 defense. The expectations were never there for that to happen. You just wanted them to improve. And they've improved, but it doesn't mean that they're not going to have holes. They still have holes. We've seen it in the secondary now for 3 straight weeks. But at the same time, they've faced the basically the 4 top passing offenses in the league now. If you talk about Colorado, Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, and now TCU, in terms of statistics, overall, how much they want to throw the ball, how much they do throw the ball, raw statistics, that's them. And they've got through this stretch, and they went 3-4 in those games when they're facing those offenses. And I think that is what you needed to happen. At the end of the day, what matters is what's on the scoreboard. And this game was a perfect example of that. There's many opportunities for Baylor's defense to get off the field on 3rd down. They got off the field on 3rd down. They did give up some 4th down conversions in this game. Obviously, one late that was pretty big to extend a drive. But I think they competed, but that doesn't mean that they don't have issues that they have to work through and continue to grow defensively. Dave Aranda mentioned in the press conference we got work to do. I mean, there's zero doubt about it. And we can talk about the players. We can talk about the scheme. We just got to get better. But you can get better after winning a game going into a bye week much better than if they would have lost that game.
Right. And I think a place to start with this, and listen, I don't want to start with this being a negative thing, but Jackie Marshall's 2 penalties, I think, made TCU's final score look a lot better than maybe it should have been. I think, I might be wrong, I think they scored touchdowns on both of those drives. That he had the unsportsmanlike conduct penalty, and then he had the roughing the passer penalty. I think they scored a touchdown on both of those drives. I could be wrong. I know at least one of them, but my point in that is, like, the defense made the stop, made the play. I think one of them was like 3rd and 18 when you're getting called for this roughing the passer or getting called for the unsportsmanlike penalty.
And it was close. It was close, but you've got to pull up.
It was a penalty. And the other thing is but here's the thing, Colt, when you're getting an unsportsmanlike penalty before that, because you're talking, you're getting in people's faces, and then you're going to go and hit the quarterback, it's what's going to happen. And you should know that. And, that's unfortunate. But my whole point in saying that is the defense was put into positions to succeed. And then those 2 moments really, I think, made TCU's offensive performance as far as points go look better. Now, I will also say TCU dropped a 80-yard touchdown to Savion Williams. That should have been a touchdown. It was completely blown coverage. But at the end of the day, I felt like Baylor's defense played the bend but don't break style. The only issue was, and this is another issue that's just continuing to rear its head a little bit for Baylor, is they're just not forcing turnovers.
Yeah.
And like, this was the game where you felt like that could happen. And truthfully, once again, we've talked about it. They didn't even have many opportunities for turnovers.
Yeah.
Like, I can't even think of one that was just like, oh, that should have been a pick. Like,
Yeah.
no, they had the fumble that maybe they should have jumped on, but Baylor got lucky with the Sawyer fumble as well that they recovered. So it was kind of a wash there. But the interceptions, I mean, Baylor didn't really give themselves chances. And I think that's my biggest issue with the performance defensively is just they weren't around the football enough. And then there were some blown coverages. But in general, again, we talk about them being more physical on offense. I think they were the more physical team on defense as well. I think they won up front. They consistently, for the most part, stopped the run. I know they gave up a few, runs here or there to Savion Williams, but at the end of the day, you held them to 105 rushing yards. That was basically what you need to do in order to win this game. And now TCU is 5-1 in games they've ran for 100 yards. So again, that's a credit to Baylor being able to, stop the run, stop them almost under 100 yards, make them drive down the field, be consistent. And, ultimately TCU just was. They were consistent enough to go and score points even on the road.
Yeah. TCU 4 of 12 on third downs. And if I go into this game and you tell me before you're going to hold TCU to 4 of 12 on third downs, you feel really good. That's 33%. I don't know what their exact average was for the season, but they can move the football like that. That was never in question coming into this game. They have a ton of first downs every single game that they play. So you tell me they're going to go 4 of 12, you feel pretty good without even telling me what the fourth downs are going to be. But like you said, the penalties were the issue on at least 2 occasions where you give them one, it's 15 yards, regardless of where they're on the field. It's 15 yards that you're giving up. Ultimately, if they score a touchdown or not, it's a moot point. But it's two penalties, flips field position, if nothing else, at the end of the day. And those were bad penalties. I think there were some times where, we could talk about officials and we could talk about all that stuff. There were some key opportunities for flags to be thrown TCU's offense that weren't. But in general, it was a pretty, numbers wise, pretty even game in terms of penalties. Obviously late, they pick up a flag on Baylor's, the deep pass that didn't end up mattering, but it could have on a pass interference play. But I thought in general, like, you knew Baylor's secondary struggled going into this game, and what they did defensively was enough. Like, that's at this juncture of the season when you're fighting for bowl eligibility, you got to do enough to get there. And that's what they did. I think that Dave Aranda said it best. If you haven't listened to his press conference after the game, go listen to it, because he takes it on himself to say, this is on me. This goes back on me. And I think that gives you a good feeling going into the bye week of what the secondary will be working on. It's absolutely what they're going to be working on. Now, the next 3 teams that are going to play don't throw the football as much as what we've seen. And that in and of itself is going to help out a lot. So I'm anxious to see what they come out of this bye week looking like. But I thought in general, to have this bye week after this emotional game, usually I cringe, and I tweeted this after the game, or whatever you call it now on X, but I put it out there. It's like, there's times when I'll be upset. Like, this wasn't a worthy moment to go rush the field. Like, it wasn't a top, 5 team that they beat, but it was a good opportunity for this fan base to just decompress a little bit. And they did that. But now they have a bye week. They have a week off going into the West Virginia game. It comes at the perfect time after that win. There's not going to be this hangover effect from this win this Saturday when you're going to Morgantown. We've seen what that can do back in the 2014 season when they went to Morgantown after a big win over TCU. And they shouldn't have that excuse in 2 weeks from now.
Right. And I wanted to mention the field storming, because I got a lot of texts like saying basically Baylor better not storm the field. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what are we doing? Like, you're facing TCU. Like, this is a game you expect to win, right? TCU is not, 5-3 or whatever. But my thought on it is, like, when was the last time that Baylor did rush the field, first of all? And then second of all, when's the next time they're going to rush the field? Because it's not going to be this year. Like, you're not rushing the field if you beat Kansas. Like, you're just not. And so that was kind of my perspective. And it's like, well, some of these people who, these fans have never gotten to storm the field. Like, these students, like, it's a cool moment. You went on a game-winning field goal. I'm fine with it. It's been so long since they have stormed the field. I couldn't even tell you when the last time it is. My thought goes to 2021 versus Oklahoma. I think
they rushed it twice in the game. That was definitely the last one, because they rushed it and then had to clear it off because Baylor was kicking the field goal and
running up the score.
Running up the score to actually a tiebreaker situation. But they kicked the field goal. Everybody rushes it twice. But that was it. But truly, man, after what this team and this program has been through, and you say that in the way of like, they just have struggled so much, specifically at home against TCU, the environment that was there. I was like, whatever, like just
Mhm.
go for it and have fun and do it. And I think to your point, like you got to go back until at least the 22 season where there was even the competition at home to have this opportunity to do it. And truthfully, that was 3. So you're talking about a student body that hasn't had an opportunity to do it
Yeah.
and had that fun. And that's ultimately all it was. It was like a gradual trickle of people going out on the
Mhm.
field. And it was cool to see. Like, I was showing my 7-year-old son the video that my wife took, and he was like, "Wait, what did they do?" And he's like, "Yeah, they're on the field for like 30 minutes after the game." He was pumped about it. He didn't even know what was going on. So it's just those memories that it creates.
No.
And we're getting away from the game, but I still think it got this game specifically allowed for this moment to happen, and you can't take away from it. It is what it is, and cool memory for all the students.
It was kind of funny though, because I'm like the game that was being, shown kind of where I was like looking at my phone and watching. I was able to watch some of the games that were going on, during the Baylor game, and South Carolina beat A&M. And the picture of their field is literally the whole field is covered by the student body. And then you watch Baylor's and it's like from the 40 to the 40
Yeah,
is all that was
yeah,
filled. It got more packed, but it was just funny to see the contrast there. But
yeah.
kind of just getting back to the game a little bit here, Cole. I think you're exactly right when you talk about the fact that Baylor's not going to face a team that can throw the ball like TCU could, and Colorado as well. There's not another team like that. These other teams are going to challenge them in different ways. Like you're going to see more mobile quarterbacks than they've seen so far this year. Like the next 3 games all have mobile quarterbacks. So that's going to change up the dynamic a little bit, I think, for the run defense. But you talk about the passing games, and then you also talk about, Jack Besh and Savion Williams are really good. Like those 2 guys carried their offense on this night, and Hoover was really good too. I'm not going to take anything away from him, but those 2 guys, they weren't just open. They were creating separation, and then obviously Savion Williams is running the football too, being asked to do a ton for this team. So you're not going to see another duo like that going forward. You probably aren't going to see another quarterback that can throw the ball like Hoover going forward either. And so that's a good sign. The bad signs are I still don't think this Baylor secondary is where it needs to be. Whether that's going into next year, I think it's more that question as opposed to where they're at. Like nothing's really going to change this year. They're going to have to continue to play bend but don't break. Hope that they start forcing some turnovers. Hope that guys continue to develop, during the bye week. But I think in general, that is a question that I have going forward, going into next year. How do you make this unit even better and even more competitive where you're forcing turnovers, making things a little bit harder on the defense, especially in one-on-one situations? I don't feel like they're winning enough in those one-on-one situations against the quality opponent. So that's just a question going forward. I felt like they played fine in this game. They just didn't take away the football and they gave up explosive plays.
Yeah, well, that was the deal with Josh Hoover. We knew that he was plenty talented. You knew that the numbers that TCU's offense puts up passing the ball every single game, total offense in general, like they were going to get theirs. The question was, can you get turnovers? Because they give them up a ton. We talked about the previous week with Alan Bowman. He throws interceptions. That's what happens. And Baylor didn't get one until the 4th quarter of that game. Had a couple opportunities, but this game, they didn't have those opportunities. Josh Hoover did a good job protecting the ball. I think even on his scrambles, you can tell it has been a point of emphasis. They've probably been coaching it hard and hard and hard the entire season. And then this game, they knocked it out once and that was it. And he protected the ball well. So give him the credit. They obviously did what they needed to do in terms of protecting the football. Baylor didn't take it away, which is something they've struggled with. And I wanted Baylor's rushing defense in this game. And yeah, Baylor, you mentioned it. Baylor gave up over 100 yards.
Barely.
Barely. But really, like you look at TCU's rushing offense, and just in terms of yards per play, Baylor gave up or got 3.28 yards per rush against TCU is what TCU's offense got against Baylor's defense. That number, Houston beat it at 3. SMU beat it at 2, like 2.03. But that 3.28 is actually a really good number versus TCU's offense. They haven't run it a ton until they picked it up a lot more late. But like the number that they got, even with Savion Williams totals, was still pretty strong. You feel good about that performance, especially going into West Virginia, where they're going to run the ball a ton with their running backs and Garrett Green at quarterback. Then obviously Houston, that's all they're doing right. They had 11 pass attempts in their upset win over Kansas State. And then obviously Kansas, we know what they're going to try to do running the football. So you think you go into those games feeling, hey, this is at least playing into the strengths of our defense rather than the weaknesses of our defense.
Right. Yeah, I felt like they did a good job. And I think in general, you mentioned those 2 games. That was before they started utilizing Savion Williams. And
Yeah.
honestly, they came up with some very creative things for
Yeah.
this game. Like the way that they were running the football was a lot of, kind of misdirection, a lot of movement pre-snap.
Yeah. And that's not something they had done in his rush attempts the last 2 games. It was pretty straightforward stuff. This was very much eye candy. Let's see if we can get you. And it worked. I mean, there was stuff that they showed on film in this particular game that they had not shown in those last 2 games where they utilized him.
Right. And so that even adds even more context to that number. That's a really good job by Baylor, I felt like, in this game, stopping the run. I'll also say this, man, and there's going to be a lot of I have a lot of questions about TCU because honestly, every time they handed the ball off to a running back, that was a win for Baylor. Like, what are you doing? Like, you might as well throw it every time or have Savion take the snap, because that's what was working. Like, every time they handed the ball off to their other running backs, it was like, thank you for doing that. I know Payne had a couple, moments, but it wasn't really in the run game. And so I think that was crazy. I also feel like, TCU's got a 4th and 2 with 10:22 left, and they punt the football at the Baylor 46.
Yeah.
I was shocked. I was for sure they're going for this, and almost for sure they're going to get it, because it felt that way, and they didn't go for it. I was stunned.
Yeah. That was for me in that moment of like, okay, Baylor's probably going to win this game because of that decision. And then Baylor takes the next possession. They go and score. They go for it, convert their own 4th down. And that was a head scratcher for me, because like Baylor had, I mean, obviously you look at the 3rd down totals, it was 3 of 4, or at that, I don't know what at that point it was, but Baylor did a good job on 3rd down. So that's the only thing that I imagine was like that Dykes didn't want to give Baylor the ball at midfield. Like that was obviously, and he said it in his post game, it was that we wanted to be able to pin them back deep, make them drive the length of the field. Well, they did it. And that was the hindsight 2020. But truthfully, like at that juncture of the game, you hadn't really stopped Baylor's offense. So like 50 yards or 90 yards, what was going to be much of the difference? You weren't stopping the run. And that decision in and of itself was just because like if you get that, you're at least getting a field goal in my mind, and you're probably going to score a touchdown. And they punted it. I'm with you. Like that was, for me, that might have been the turning point of the game in Baylor's favor.
Right. And their punt got Baylor the ball at the 20. It was like they didn't even have a crazy good punt that pinned them deep. I mean, it was a nothing, you know what I mean? And then honestly, like that drive that Baylor went on was ultimately kind of the end of TCU's any ability TCU had to stop the run. That was like the end of it, because they just kept running at him. Dude, running at him. And
impressive.
It was really impressive. And these guys are getting driven back. And I know TCU did end up making a bit of a stand and forcing Baylor to have to convert a long 4th down on that last drive. But in general, I felt like Baylor.
But that was not because they stopped the run. That was because of Baylor's situation. You know what I'm saying? Like if Baylor would have had 30 more seconds, run the ball. TCU didn't necessarily stop it in my mind.
So I guess what I'm pointing to more so is those first few plays on that drive, they made Baylor waste a lot of time because they were stopping the run. And so like you lost a lot of time, and TCU, again, that's more of just me saying like TCU made a couple plays on that last drive to at least.
They knew Baylor was going to run the ball, and they were able to take more time off the clock.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah. And that was a little puzzling by Baylor as well. But in general, that was what Baylor was doing well. So it was like, how do you go away from it?
Yeah, and I think if you get into a situation there, and it's going to be widely discussed and criticized, fortunately they won, but it's like if you go and you throw on 1st and 2nd down and you have incompletions, you're setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah.
Then they know you're throwing it on 3rd down, because you can't take the risk of not getting a 1st down. You got to go for a 1st down. So it's like, I understood what they're going to do. And then as soon as they got the 1st down, then it's okay, go. And they did. And fortunately they were able to get down the field, and we can relive that drive. But I think in general, it worked out perfect. And now we mentioned it earlier, the pass interference, and I honestly haven't even gone back to look at the interference that they picked up on that particular play. I don't know how egregious it was. I don't know what it should have, but the fact that they throughout the game threw so many penalty flags, my issue is that you throw it, you've been throwing them and calling them all game, then to pick it up. That was the frustrating part. It's kind of like, dude, you've been throwing flags the entire game, and then in this moment you throw it, and then you say, "Oh, never mind, it wasn't. We just screwed this one up. This wasn't right." When you've
That
had
was my
so many
issue with
blunders.
it too. Yeah, that was my complete issue with it. I honestly, I didn't feel like it was pass interference, but I also feel like if you throw your flag, there's nothing
There was something
there's nothing that anyone can say that's like, oh, that for sure wasn't pass interference. Like,
Yeah.
I watch football all the time. They hardly ever pick up flags. Hardly
for
ever.
for a pass
PI?
interference. Yeah.
I saw one today. I saw one today just watching the NFL, which the NFL is way looser. They don't call as many pass interferences because of the reward for getting them is spot foul. Guy steps on a receiver's shoe and they throw a pass interference flag. They throw it completely the wrong call, but they stick to it. And so that was a big issue for me as well. It ultimately didn't cost Baylor, but it was something that I definitely noted because it's like, man, I feel like Baylor's been on the wrong end of some of these calls in a home game that was a little bit interesting to me.
Well, I think everybody was on edge too after the blunder or whatever the heck happened at the end zone where you basically have 3 plays blown dead after a penalty to go fix a penalty that you got wrong. Like that's, to me, especially when I'm watching it from the second level of the stadium and I knew exactly what happened, that there's 12 defenders on the field.
Yep.
So yes, there might have been a false start, but that's offsetting penalties no matter what. Like there's you have, and they're off, not only were there 12, they were offsides.
Yeah.
And for someone to have to call down and tell you, hey, you screwed this up after you've had 3 opportunities to fix it. I'm assuming they called down and told them this. And then to have to go review it. I'm like, what planet are you living on? Anyways, that's a whole nother rant.
Well, Baylor scored a touchdown on the play where they blew it dead.
Spavital exploded. It was nice to see on the sideline when Spavital did explode. Like there needed to happen, and I hated that it wasn't Aranda, but it was, someone needed to do it, and he did.
Well, and they ran another play as well and blew that one dead too. And I'm sure Spav is like, hey man, like how many plays are you going to allow TCU to see here?
Yeah.
Like you're giving them plays that they're getting to see off of Spav's play sheet. I would be super upset too. He was heated and he deserved to be. They almost took away a touchdown. Luckily, it didn't matter. It ended up not mattering at all. They got the ball at the 1. Pendergrass scored. Also, selfishly, Bryson probably should have gotten that because that would have been 5 touchdowns for Bryson Washington on the day had he gotten that one. But a moment that ended up being a nothing burger, but at the time was definitely something that Baylor fans were like, hey, man, we're going to get screwed.
Yeah, because if worst case scenario, you attempt a field goal. I mean, not worst case. Worst case, you fumble the ball in the next play and you don't score a touchdown. Yeah. You might get a field goal out of it, and that's the difference in the game ultimately. So we've talked about the defense plenty. We got to talk about the offense, or we're going to go for 2 more hours on this one. But offensively, man, like from the beginning of the game, I was concerned a little bit about the run game. Like you've had 2 really good games in a row where you've run the ball. You're like flying high. Your offensive line has a ton of confidence. What was TCU going to do? But dude, from the first drive of the game, like that worry was, all right, they're running the ball the rest of this game. And dude, like I have not been, obviously we haven't seen it since 2015 at least, of running for 250 yards in 3 straight games. Now they've done it, and it's like the rest of the season they can run the football. Like you're going to have the opportunity to run. West Virginia is a tough challenge, but this Baylor football team can run the ball. Things are open up in the passing game. But TCU had no answer for it. And TCU plays a physical style of defense. But Baylor's offensive line, Michael Trigg at tight end, I mean, everything that Baylor ran for the most part. I don't know how many tackles for loss TCU ended up having. They had some sacks, but
I think it was 3 or 4.
Yeah, it was so small, especially the way they want to play defense. And Sawyer Robertson doesn't have passing touchdowns. Whatever. Bryson Washington's going to have 4 rushing touchdowns. Dawson has his 1, and that was impressive, man. That I think in general they'd set the tone for that game. And without some of the defensive issues, they controlled that game because of the offense and the offensive line specifically.
Right. I think for the most part, kind of how I looked at was the run game was clearly going to win them this game. Like that was going to be
Yeah.
how Baylor was going to win this game. They were going to run the football. It looked early that they were going to have success, and that continued. Sawyer just wasn't quite as sharp early on. It took him a little bit, it felt like, to kind of get things going. There were a few throws that he's been making during this run that he just missed on a couple, and they could have led to big plays. But I felt like he settled in really nicely. And strangely enough, it felt like once he ran the ball a few times, it kind of got him going a little bit more in the pass game. And he hit on a couple plays. He had, a short throw to Monterey Baldwin that ends up going for, 40 yards, a big play, big explosive play. Great block by Ketron Jackson on that play as well to seal the edge. But, and then of course Sawyer has the moment, right? The moment where he hits Michael Trigg and it's just like 4th and 9, all this pressure on you. You make the throw that wins you the football game.
Yeah.
You lead a game-winning drive. Like all of these things are so important. And yes, he didn't score the touchdown. Yes, he didn't throw for more yards than Josh Hoover. Yes, he did. Probably you would say he didn't outduel Josh Hoover, but what he did do was he played winning football and he kept Baylor's offense moving down the field. And at the most important times, he absolutely came through.
Yeah, he did. And I mean, he was a catalyst in the run game because of what he could do with his legs. He was sacked a couple times, but QBR over 80 again.
Yep.
Those numbers, and a lot of that has to do with his legs too, and converting third downs, because that QBR does equate getting first downs, being effective with your legs. But for him to not throw a touchdown pass in this game was a testament to Baylor's offensive line in general. Man, that the 4th down play, like, I think that's going to be the most widely discussed decision, and rightfully so. Like, that was after Sonny didn't go for it on 4th down on their side of on Baylor's side of the field. Dave Aranda had 2 4th downs after that he made the decision to go for it. We saw this all in the 21 season where they went for it on 4th down regularly. Now this year it's kind of back in action, like they're doing it more and more. But that play, man, like at that juncture, I just said, like, just punt it. Like, I don't really have faith in overtime, but make them use their timeout. You did that. Well, now go punt it. And literally until the moment that I saw I was expecting him to punt, do a little pooch punt. Like, I thought for sure, like, they're snapping it to him, he's just going to punt it. Like, I thought that's what they were doing. You don't give him a chance for a return. Maybe you get it inside the 5, game's going to overtime. But that throw, as soon as he stepped up, there's not a bigger mismatch for Baylor's offense. And that's all due respect to any of the other receivers. Michael Trigg is such a mismatch. And the move that he put on to get open on that play, you might be able to do that 10 times a game if you wanted to. It was the perfect throw, right on the money, sure hands. He had a drop earlier in the game that he hadn't really had this season. But, man, it was perfect. And then the play following that with Bryson Washington, I don't know if you listened to the post game, and they gave him the ball and he's running and he's staying up and he gets the first down. And he said in the moment, he was like, all I was trying to do was fall down and nobody would let me fall down because like I didn't want the time to go out. And rightfully so. Like, you're thinking, I got to get down. He had plenty of time. He might have gotten another 5 yards had he not tried to fall. Like, they might have pushed him into the end zone the way they were going. Obviously, we know it. Isaiah Hankins comes back after missing the extra point, kicks a field goal to win it. And I mean, that drive was awesome for this Baylor team. Like, that was so many times the BYU game, drives fall short. You don't score a touchdown. You have the issues against Colorado to end. This one against TCU, against your rival, you have however many yard drive that was to win it, and you win it in front of your home crowd. We discussed the field rushing, but I think right now that drive kind of epitomizes what Baylor football is right now in this 3-game win streak.
It definitely does. And I just feel like it's one of those moments where you're looking around and you're like, okay, what's the culture at Baylor right now? And I think it's pretty clear at this juncture that the culture has completely flipped, and that the culture and the talent and guys gaining confidence, gaining momentum, it's happening. And I think, like, you look at across, if you listen to Big 12 podcasts or you listen to people who write about, Big 12 sports or whatnot, like, they see Baylor rising as well. I think it's becoming very noticeable, the improvements that they've made this season and just kind of where they're at as a program now. And I think that drive and really this whole game kind of epitomizes it, because you're winning a close game, right? Like, the other 2 games, they kind of had in hand. The Oklahoma State game was close, but I felt like, you win by 10 and it was kind of back and forth, but I felt like Baylor was in control of that game. This game was like, can you win a close game? Can you win a Big 12 type game? Because Big 12, you have a lot of these close games. Can you win games like that? And Baylor did. And you know, Sawyer was awesome. I mean, Bryson Washington, 26 carries, 196 yards, 4 touchdowns. And then he also had 22 yards receiving. So he had over 200 yards of total offense. He was a monster in this game. They just kept handing him the football. And a week ago, we talked about, oh, they needed Dawson Pendergrass's patience, right? His patient running style. In this game, they needed a guy who was just going to run through people. And Bryson was breaking arm tackles all night. By the end of the game, TCU wanted zero part of trying to tackle this dude. I mean, at all. You could feel it. Like in the stadium, you could feel that Baylor was going to keep running the football and TCU was not going to stop it. And so, yeah, I haven't had that kind of feeling, truthfully, since the 2021 season when Abram was having games like that, where it's just like, oh, man, I mean, the defense is feeling him. You can tell they're gassed. And I kind of saw it in this game. And I think Baylor did a great job. And we mentioned this pregame, just TCU's depth up front, not good. Like their starting unit, solid. Depth, not there. And Baylor really attacked that, I felt like. And so, yeah, a great game by Bryson Washington. The receivers, once again, spread it all out. You know, Trigg and Cameron led them, but you had, 1 for 40 for Monterey Baldwin. You had 3 for 36 for Ashton Hawkins. You had 3 for 29 for Howell. It just kind of spread it all out. Don't give the defense one guy to key in on, and then you can attack from kind of many different angles and many different shots in many different ways.
Yeah, and I think with the rush game, everyone was like, oh, it's Oklahoma State. They suck against the run, all this stuff. And not that TCU is the greatest. I think that Baylor's it's just a kind of another staple, right? It's like, okay, they did it again. But I want to go back for just a second. And it's to the Texas Tech defense. They beat Iowa State this weekend. They held Iowa State to 3.5 yards per rush. That was after holding TCU to 4.3. And you can go back through this list. That number that Baylor put up against Tech's defensive front at 7.7 is still very impressive. And I know Tech's defense isn't that great, but I think it's just another confirmation of what Baylor's doing rushing the football. TCU was that, but it was just like I went and watched or looked at the stats of the Tech game against Iowa State. I mean, they just eliminated their run game for the most part. 333 yards, 3.5 yards per carry, no rushing touchdowns after what Baylor did to them a couple weeks ago. The rushing offense is legit, and it's only they get into the game against West Virginia, who struggles mightily against the pass. They can play the run, but they're going to have to do something in the pass game. Like now they're really in a bind of we're going to be good at stopping the run, but we already are not very good. Baylor's offense is becoming this like, what do you do? Who do you defend? And that's 3 games in a row that they not necessarily have decided not to take away the run, but it's like you can do whatever you want to try to do against the run, but we're going to still be able to have success running the football. And it's been against 3 different styles of defenses in general. So I'm anxious to see this run game improve. I think it's only going to get better through another bye week. And they're going to have a good game plan for West Virginia. That West Virginia has a big rivalry game this weekend against Cincinnati. Cincinnati's favored by 4 in that game. It's going to be emotional for them for a lot of reasons. But the fact that Baylor's bye week comes on a week where they're playing a rivalry game is huge because you don't know what's going to happen this week. Baylor's only going to get healthier. So I think in general, man, like there's a lot of reasons to feel good about these last 3 games. Winning, you mentioned it, winning a close game. I don't know when is the last time they won a 3-point game at home against a Big 12 opponent?
You got to go back a ways, right? Because the Kansas game that they won in 2022, they won by, I think, like 11. So
it was double digits. Yeah.
Right. So you're going to have to go back a ways, I think, to find a single-digit win at home.
It might be the 21 season. 22, it would have been you lose to Oklahoma State at home. That wasn't it. You beat Kansas at home. You didn't win another game. So it was at least the 21 season. It would have been the Oklahoma game, I guess, in 21, where they've won a close game at home. 21. They beat Tech 21, 27-24 was the last time they beat a home team. Beat a Big 12 team by 3 or less points. So, like, the confidence they're going to get from these games is big. I'm really anxious to see how they grow in this off week. And I think it starts defensively with Dave Aranda and what they're going to do with the secondary, playing teams that don't throw the ball nearly as well. Can that become a more suffocating defense with the secondary kind of leading the way?
And you're playing weaker offenses, right? Like West Virginia's got a good offense and a bad defense. So they're more kind of similar to, I think, what they faced, to be honest, the last 3 weeks. I think that's where West Virginia's at.
They just run the ball really
Yeah,
well versus throw the ball really well.
right. And they have a mobile quarterback. So that's a little different than who Baylor's faced the last 3 weeks, because those quarterbacks are some of the most immobile quarterbacks in the league that they've faced. So different challenge there. Their receivers aren't very good, and that's really hurt them. And then their defense isn't good. But you look at Houston, and it's like they're more like the teams that you played kind of early in the year. When you look at Utah and Iowa State, now they're not as good as those teams. Like, I know they've won some games here and there, and especially at home, they seem rather dangerous, especially defensively. But
they beat Kansas State, but that I haven't seen the videos, but apparently it was like a downpour the entire game against Kansas State, like torrential rain. Like, turn the TV on, you can't even see the football. But I haven't seen it myself, so I'll have to turn it on after we look and after this and look at it.
And you would think that would favor K-State with Avery Johnson and DJ Giddens. I haven't really gone and dove into that game quite yet. We'll see. Houston's been kind of like play really well, play really bad, play really well, play really bad. So it's kind of, we'll see what Baylor gets there. And then, of course, Kansas at the end of the year, and Lord knows what they're going to be looking at. They might be just kind of packing it in, because their next few games are rather tough before they play Baylor. So opportunities here, of course, the top priority is making a bowl game, but I think selfishly, I think Baylor, has a chance here to get really greedy and potentially win 7 or 8 games. I mean, it is there for them. They're not going to face a team that I think is better than them on a neutral site. They would be favored against all 3 of these teams on a neutral site. And so that just tells me you should be able to figure out a way to at least get one, probably at least 2 of these, and you're kind of hoping for a 3rd win. But the way they're playing right now is a clear sign that this program is adapting, this program is changing, and there's big momentum as Baylor enters its 2nd bye week of the year.
Yeah. One game at a time for sure. So, all right, Baylor family, that's going to do it for this episode of Inside Baylor Sports. Thanks to each of you for listening. Have a great Monday. Make sure you check out the Baylor basketball team tonight, 10:30 p.m. Central Time. Obviously a little bit late for that game against Gonzaga. But each of you have a great Monday, and Sick 'em Bears.